We appreciate you joining us for an IEA reporter interview that will get to the heart of Idaho's shortcomings and in some cases failures in properly funding our public schools and in supporting our public education. Our guest is Senator Janie Ward-Engelking, who sits on both the Senate Education Committee and the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, also known as JFAC. Politics is a second career track for the senator. She was a classroom teacher for many years and is a longtime IEA member. Senator, let's talk policy first and then over to budget intersection there, obviously, between the two. But unless I'm missing something, it doesn't appear that there's been a single piece of legislation introduced during this session that could be viewed as really supporting public schools. But there have been a number of bills introduced in the last handful of days that are concerning and perhaps even dangerous for our public education system. Just this morning, for instance, the House Education Committee introduced a new voucher bill that would potentially divert much needed public education dollars to private schools. What can you tell us about this piece of legislation in particular and the perils of private school vouchers in general?
Well, I haven't seen that bill yet because it was just introduced, and so it hasn't made it to the Senate side, and it's just being printed. But vouchers in general, we have a state constitution that's very explicit, and it says that absolutely no public funds should be used for private schools. And we all swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, Idaho's Constitution. And so in my mind, that crosses the line. It does not fit with our Idaho state constitution. We can sometimes, like with dual credits, we found a way to thread the needle a little bit and allow private school students to take some of those dual credits, but the money goes to a public university or college, and absolutely no money goes to the private school. So, occasionally we've looked at it and we've been able to provide some assistance with college credits or AP classes. But this, if it's a voucher bill where we take public money and we use it for private schools, I believe it's unconstitutional.
So you approach that primarily from a constitutional perspective, not as much as from the just a budgetary piece where we're already struggling to fund our public schools, and this would further delete those coffers potentially.
Well, the way we beat the bill in this legislature is to do the constitutional piece, but you're absolutely right. We're 51st in the nation in per pupil expenditures. We have not, in my opinion, we have not met our constitutional duty to fund schools and create a thorough, general, common, free public school. We have 93 school districts that had to pass supplemental levies, and it's it's hundreds of millions of dollars. And we have school districts that can't pass those levies. And really, this funding should be coming from at the state level. We shouldn't have districts that are having to pass levies, and they're not for supplemental programs. They're to keep the doors open. So you're right, we have not funded education adequately on the state level.
All right, we've already made the transition over to talking about funding and budget, so let's keep going in that direction, and we'll come back to some of these other bills that we find potentially concerning. One of those is a budget bill, essentially, and that's HB 199. It's a massive tax cut bill that would eat up most of the huge budget surplus that Idaho, fortunately, has been able to accumulate, somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 million in budget surplus that could, and we can make the argument should, be used to invest in public education and get us out of that 51st dead last ranking that you just referred to. And instead, the legislature is undertaking a massive tax cut of over $400 million of that $600 million.
And I find it ironic that the tax cut is to cut the income tax rate. And the reality is most Idahoans didn't have any income this year, or they had very little income. So the people aren't going to benefit from this. It's a huge tax cut, and it's going to go to those people that made money this year. And frankly, they don't need it. We need to, if we're going to do some kind of tax cut, it should be property tax. We should be looking at property tax because that's a huge problem for people, and it's a real onerous tax. or we should be looking at the grocery tax. This does lower the sales tax, I think, to 5.3%, but it takes away the grocery tax credit, and that's a wash. So people aren't going to see any money there, and they're probably going to pay more for groceries, the taxes on groceries, and without that credit. So it's, in my opinion, it's a horrible bill. It does not address any of the needs that I'm hearing from my constituents. They want property tax relief. They want some relief for grocery tax credit or a grocery tax repeal. So for sales tax, so I just don't see that this is needed at all. And you're right, it's going to eat away at the money we have. This is an opportunity we have. We could fund full day kindergarten. Think of the things we could do with that money if we really invested it in education and we invested it in our students' career path. We could help them with more scholarships so that they don't get out of college owing thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and we know there's going to be a learning lag because students have been in school, out of school, virtual, all sorts of problems there. And we're going to have to do some, I hesitate to call it remediation because we're all in the same boat, but we're going to have to catch those kids up, and it's going to require some funding to do that. So we've got lots of needs, and this tax cut does not address any of the needs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and related to part of what you just talked about, and that's the remediation or helping students and schools kind of work through and overcome the COVID-19 pandemic and the situations that they've been forced into as a result. The other question I had for you is with this pot of federal money, Idaho's only distributed, it's about 40% of 106 million in emergency funds through the Education Stabilization Fund, and only about 14.5% of 48 million in ESSER money, which is another bucket of money that comes from the federal government expressly to help with this purpose. And yet it seems that a lot of it's sitting in bank accounts in Boise rather than getting out to students and schools that would benefit from it. What's the holdup, and why are these funds just kind of sitting there idle?
Well, I can tell you my thoughts on it. You know, the legislature's been very busy. I mean, we've printed more bills in the first few weeks than ever before, and we've only passed 4 laws, and we've been here 6 weeks. We're spending all our time trying to figure out a way to strip the governor of his powers, or to stop initiatives being put on the ballot, or to figure out a way to call ourselves back into special session whenever we want. We're not doing the people's business. We're not getting that money into the hands of Idahoans. JFAC has worked hard to get those supplementals passed, but they're languishing in the House and in the Senate. They're just not getting taken up. The House has been reading bills for 2 days, so I think they've maybe considered 2 or 3 bills in 2 days, and that's not effective. And it makes you wonder. The governor said, okay, you guys are coming into town, so I'm going to put you in charge of getting this money out and deciding how it should be spent. But I think we're not as nimble as we thought we should be or could be. And so we're having issues getting it out there. I know the State Department has had some, I think they are trying to get rid of the CARE or get the CARES money out, the CARES 1 or 2 money out, and then go to the ESSER money. But the reality is our schools need it right now. We've got increased costs in transportation and sanitation, and the lunches, we're doing box lunches instead of meals, and some of those lunches have to be transported. There's so many costs out there that are related to the pandemic, and frankly, school districts need it right now. Some of it I've heard too is that you need to spend money and get reimbursed. Well, some districts are cash poor. They can't, they don't have the money to spend it to get reimbursed. So we're trying to work through some of that. And I've met with the State Department and trying to figure out a pathway forward to make it easier, and met with the governor's office. So they're aware there's a problem, but we haven't found the fix yet, but we're working on it. But you're right, that money needs to be in the hands of Idahoans in schools right now.
But just to clarify, it's primarily a legislative logjam rather than a hiccup somewhere else?
I think some of the money that would go like to Meals on Wheels and rent assistance and those types of things, that's a legislative logjam. The school funding money might be just the way it was set up to do it. And we can, it probably needs to be changed. If districts don't have the money to spend to get reimbursed, then we've got to figure out a better plan.
And worth noting that Idaho would be ineligible for the next round, the ESSER 2 funds, the next round of federal emergency funds, if they don't spend down the first two rounds that they have sitting in bank accounts in Boise. Let's move on to some of these other policy issues and the bills that we identified as potentially concerning. Another one is HB 174. It would essentially make bargaining with local education associations optional for school districts. We sort of understand this, but for the general public, why is this problematic?
Well, this is basically Prop 1 from the Luna laws coming back. And the people voted those down. They know it's good practice to have our school boards and our administrators and our teachers sit down and work out a reasonable contract. It takes away all the angst that's there when teachers are excluded, when they can be included in the curriculum, the budget. It's just a better way to do business. And we have had that in place, and it says shall. Now they want to change it to may. And, a lot of districts would continue to do it, but there are some that wouldn't. And it depends probably on the school board and the administrators. But the reality is, when we all work together, we all sit down and figure out the best path forward, it's better for our kids. And I just think that's a terrible bill. Plus, the people have spoken. They said no to Prop 1, 2, and 3 when they were on the ballot, and we should not be bringing those back.
And in keeping with this theme of legislation that at best neutral and in many cases potentially harmful to public education, from this legislative body that likes to espouse the theory of limited government and local control, we have a bunch of bills that would seem to be counterintuitive to that, and they're trying to take that power to govern away from local school districts and local health districts and voters, even as we talk about things like the bill that would eliminate the August election window, which is one that school districts rely on to be able to pass the raft of levies that you alluded to earlier. And there's also a bill to limit the ability for voters to bring ballot initiatives, which may not be directly impactful to education, but it's pretty clearly a pushback and a reaction to Reclaim Idaho putting forth a ballot initiative that would have essentially forced the government to do their job and better fund public education. So what about those two bills and just kind of the general tone and tenor, I guess, of this particular legislative session in that regard?
Well, let me just tell you that irony is alive and well at the State House, and we see it every day where they're all for local control except when they're not, and except when they want to control. And, good example is the initiative. They don't want voters to do it. They don't want school districts to decide when they need these elections. And we know that they need that August date, because if a levy fails in May, they have to run it in August. They can't wait till November, because they have to know whether they can hire the teacher, whether they have enough money to do the curriculum and the programs that they put in place. That August date is critical. So, but yeah, I can cite example after example where they say, well, we really want local control. And then they turn right around. Well, a good example is they were telling us, well, each person should be able to decide whether to wear a mask or not. They are perfectly capable of making their own health decisions, and it should be up to the person, the individual. But then they turn right around and they want to put in the Constitution that CBD oil and medical marijuana can never be legal in Idaho. They want that in the Constitution because people don't know what's good for them. They really don't. We got to pass a constitutional amendment to make sure. So we deal with it every day, and it's frustrating, but hopefully we can stop that bill. It's not good for schools, and it's not good for kids.
Yeah, present company accepted, of course, but there seems to be a disconnect, and we at the IEA have done research, and we have lots of conversations with people that show that the majority of Idaho citizens are very supportive of teachers and educators and of their local public school and the job that they're doing and the opportunity that it provides. And yet we have this disconnect where the legislature doesn't seem to appreciate or respect that voice of the people, if you will.
Yeah, I find that hard to understand, really, because they Boise State University just released their policy, their new policy pamphlet or book, and education is still number one. It's number one concern for the people of Idaho, and yet we're 51st in the nation, as we've talked about, in per pupil expenditures. We don't pay our teachers or our classified staff or administrators, as well as our surrounding states. It is problematic, and the only thing I can say is that they've gotten a pretty good deal. I mean, we've had incredible teachers that have just been so motivated to do for children that we've been able to, our students have performed very well. So I think that's part of the issue. They don't see this glaring need, but I think we're starting to. There's a real shortage of teachers. We had 120 classrooms last year, and I don't even know about this year, but last year, that started the school year without a certified teacher in there. So we are starting to see a real shortage, and maybe that'll make a difference, but there's all this talk about accountability and we need to run schools like a business, and you and I both know that's not how we run schools. We run schools by finding out what's best for children and continuing every day to find a better plan for those that aren't quite getting it. And so it's an art. Teaching's an art. It's not a business model. And so that's part of the problem.
And there's, in addition to the compensation issue, which fortunately Idaho's made some progress on in recent years, but there's this kind of disrespect that permeates. And I believe you served on either the teacher pipeline committee or the governor's task force, or both. They're certainly aware of both of the results of those work groups. One of the things they found was there was a concern about kind of a disrespect for teachers or a lack of respect, and then we see comments from legislators that are kind of piling onto that. Instead of making it better, they're making it worse.
Yeah, but they love their own teachers and they think they're amazing.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. Yes.
Yeah. But then they think there's all these horrible teachers out there, and that's just not true. The job's too hard. If you don't love it, if you don't love children, it's too difficult a job to stay in. You're not going to stay there. You're going to get out and do something different, because you have to love this job and you have to love children. And I think there's just this mindset, or there's somebody, these people had maybe one bad teacher in all the years they were in school, and maybe not even a bad teacher, one that just didn't work for them. And that's their memory. So, it's just kind of, it's very interesting. And there is a mindset of some of the legislators here that anybody can teach. And that's just simply not true. And I think parents know that now. After this year, they know that having kids at home, trying to do it online and do it themselves, has been very difficult. So parents know. I'm not sure the legislature does.
One last question on the teacher compensation issue, and from your role on JFAC, where do we stand in terms of restoring the 5% that was held back by the governor in mid-pandemic and restoring the funding to the career ladder and the advanced professional educator one?
That, I think that will happen. That's in the works. They used CARES money to restore the 5% holdback. The problem is that a lot of teachers didn't see a raise last year. They were frozen, or because at the time, you know, the career ladder was still intact. It was still in statute. And so that money was sent out, but districts had to make tremendous cuts. And 80% of their budgets are usually personnel or close to it. So they made the cuts and a lot of teachers were frozen. So that money's been restored, but it didn't go into the pocket of educators. It went to the district. I think some teachers got bonuses, some didn't. So as we move forward, we will make sure that the career ladder is fully funded, that it's intact, but keep in mind that's a salary reimbursement from the state. Each district still has to negotiate their own contract, but there should be some money there somewhere that they can attach to maybe bump that up a little bit or give some one-time bonuses or something, I would think.
Yeah, and backfilling the holdback with federal funds is not the same as the state investing in public education, correct? That's essentially a pass-through that they're somewhat obligated to use in that fashion.
Well, we're going to use it, but the baseline will be last year's budget. So that will be helpful, I think. And so that's the plan anyway. But reality is we probably won't set those budgets till mid-March. So we're working on them every day at lunchtime. That's what I spend my time doing, working on K-12 budgets and higher ed and military and a few others. So I think we're going to see adequate funding for the career ladder and for classified staff and health insurance, but we really need to be using some of this surplus we have to really make an investment in education. And I don't know that we have the political will here to do that.
I mean, even the governor's budget proposal for public schools was only a 3.7% increase over last year, and that's higher than the superintendent's ask. And JFAC has their flexibility to set kind of whatever budget they want. Those are just suggestions on the part of those two executives.
And there would be a little extra because of that 20 million supplemental we hope will go through for literacy, for helping K-4 that are going to be behind, we think, because of the pandemic. So there'll be that a little bit additional. But the reality is, no, we're not. We have about a 2% growth every year with students, and Idaho is growing like crazy. So we have a 2% growth. And then if you look at a 1% to 2% cost of living increase, really a 3% just keeps us barely even. It doesn't move us ahead. And so it's very problematic, but we'll just keep plugging away. That's what we do. We just keep trying and hopefully, we'll see. I'm always a little disappointed that we don't see a little bit more from our state superintendent of schools, because she needs to be an advocate for additional money. And that just has not been the case lately.
Senator, we certainly appreciate your advocacy for our students and our professional educators and our public schools, which are a vital part of life in the state of Idaho. We appreciate you joining us. I know you have a very busy schedule, so thanks for carving out some time, and it was good to talk to you.
My pleasure. Teachers are amazing. They're my heroes. So I just thank them for all the work they're doing. I don't know how they've done it this past year, but I'm so impressed. So anyway, thank you very much for having me today.